When someone discovers that their husband has been lying for years, the first experience is rarely a clear thought about what to do next. What people usually feel first is shock, a deep, destabilizing shock that makes the world suddenly feel unfamiliar. It is not just the lie itself that hurts. It is the realization that the reality you believed you were living in may not be the whole truth. For years, you built your understanding of the relationship on certain assumptions. You trusted the words that were spoken. You trusted the explanations that were given. You trusted the daily routines that seemed to confirm that everything was normal. And then suddenly, a piece of information appears that rearranges the entire picture. The mind immediately begins trying to make sense of it. People often describe this moment as if the past itself has changed. Memories that once felt secure now feel uncertain. Conversations that seemed ordinary begin to look suspicious in hindsight. You start replaying moments in your head, searching for signs that you might have missed. How did I not see this? Was any of it real? Who is the person I've been living with? These questions are not signs of weakness. They are a natural psychological response to deception that lasted a long time. Because long-term lies do something very specific to the human mind. They fracture our sense of reality. In relationships, we depend on shared truth. Two people build a life together based on the belief that the basic story of their relationship is real and mutual. When one partner secretly constructs a different story behind the scenes, the discovery of that hidden narrative can feel like the ground has disappeared beneath your feet. Suddenly, you are standing between two realities: the relationship you thought you were living and the relationship that was actually unfolding. This is why the emotional impact of long-term deception is often deeper than people expect. It is not simply anger, it is disorientation. Your mind tries to rebuild the timeline, you question your instincts, you begin to doubt your own ability to judge what is real, and sometimes people even start blaming themselves for not discovering the truth earlier. But it is important to understand something crucial here. Trust is not foolishness. Trust is the basic mechanism that allows intimacy to exist. When we love someone, we allow ourselves to believe what they tell us. We assume honesty because without that assumption, relationships cannot function. So when someone lies for years, they are not only hiding information, they are actively shaping the reality their partner experiences. This is why the discovery can feel so destabilizing. It creates a kind of psychological vertigo. The mind struggles to find solid ground again. In moments like this, people often feel pressure to act quickly. Friends may give advice. Family members may demand decisions. Some voices say, leave immediately. Others say, try to forgive and move on. But right after a discovery like this, clarity is rarely available. When the emotional system is in shock, decisions made too quickly are often driven by panic rather than reflection. What is needed first is not immediate action. What is needed first is emotional stabilization. That means allowing yourself to experience the full range of reactions that appear. Anger may come in waves, grief may appear unexpectedly, confusion may linger longer than you would like. These emotions are not obstacles to overcome quickly. They are signals that something significant has happened, and your mind is trying to process it. It also means giving yourself permission to pause the larger life questions for a moment. You do not have to decide today whether the relationship will survive. You do not have to resolve every detail of the past immediately. You do not have to present a strong, composed version of yourself to the world. The first step is much simpler and much more important. It is to ground yourself again in your own emotional reality. That may involve talking with someone you trust. It may involve writing down your thoughts as they come. It may simply involve allowing yourself time to sit with the shock instead of trying to eliminate it immediately. Because the truth is that discovering years of lies is not just a relationship crisis. It is a moment where your entire internal map of the relationship must be redrawn, and redrawing that map takes time. Only when the shock begins to settle can you start asking the deeper questions. What actually happened? Why did it happen? What does this mean for the future? Those questions will come later in the process, but they cannot be answered clearly while the emotional earthquake is still shaking everything around you. So before you rush toward decisions, before you try to solve the entire situation, allow yourself one essential act of patience. Pause long enough to regain your footing. Because when the ground beneath you shifts so suddenly, the most important first step is not deciding where to go next. It is learning how to stand steadily again. Once the initial shock begins to settle, something else often takes its place. The mind becomes very busy, almost relentlessly busy. It starts moving backward through time, reviewing years of memories as if they were pieces of evidence in an investigation. You begin replaying conversations that once seemed ordinary, moments that felt harmless now appear suspicious, a late night at work, a cancelled plan, a vague explanation that you accepted at the time. The mind begins connecting dots that never felt connected before, and suddenly, every memory becomes a question. Was that true? Was that moment real? What else don't I know? This mental process is incredibly common after discovering years of lies. The brain is trying to reconstruct reality. It is attempting to understand how two different versions of the same relationship could exist at the same time. But there is a danger hidden inside this process. The search for truth can slowly transform into something else, an endless loop of speculation. Human beings have a powerful instinct to fill in gaps when information is missing. When we do not have a full explanation, the mind naturally begins creating one. We start building stories that seem to make sense of the fragments we have. The problem is that these stories are not always accurate. When trust has been broken, the mind tends to lean toward the most painful interpretation of events. It assumes the worst. A small uncertainty becomes evidence of something much larger. A forgotten detail becomes a sign that everything was fake. Gradually, the line between facts and assumptions begins to blur. This is why separating truth from interpretation becomes one of the most important steps after discovering long-term deception. Facts are specific. They are events that can be clearly identified. Something happened, something was said, something was hidden. But the stories we build around those facts are something different. They are interpretations our mind creates in an attempt to make emotional sense of what we are experiencing. For example, discovering that your husband lied about something for years is a fact. But the mind may quickly expand that fact into a much larger conclusion that the entire relationship was meaningless, that every moment was dishonest, that nothing you experienced together was genuine. And while those conclusions feel emotionally convincing in the moment, they are not always true. Relationships are rarely that simple. Even people who lie about certain parts of their lives can still have real moments of connection, affection, and care within the relationship. Human behavior is often contradictory. Someone can deceive in one area of life while still expressing authentic emotions in another. This complexity is uncomfortable, but it is also important to recognize. Because if the mind turns the entire past into a single narrative of deception, it can trap you inside a story that may not actually reflect the full reality of what happened. The goal is not to minimize the betrayal. The goal is to prevent the betrayal from rewriting every single memory in your life. This is why it becomes essential to slow down the process of interpretation. Instead of asking, "What does this say about everything?" a more helpful question might be, "What do I actually know for certain right now? What are the facts that have been revealed? What information still needs clarification? What assumptions might my mind be creating to fill in the unknown?" This shift creates space between you and the chaos of speculation. It allows the truth to emerge gradually, rather than forcing your mind to construct a complete narrative overnight. And this space is incredibly valuable because when people rush to fill in every missing piece immediately, they often build conclusions based on emotion rather than evidence. Another important part of this process is recognizing that you may never receive a perfectly complete explanation for everything that happened. When deception lasts for years, there are often details that remain unclear. Memory is imperfect. Motivations are complicated. Even the person who lied may struggle to explain every decision they made along the way. Waiting for absolute clarity about every detail can keep you emotionally stuck in the past. What matters more is gaining enough truth to understand the broader reality of the relationship. Enough clarity to make thoughtful decisions about the future. That is where the focus eventually needs to move. Not every hidden detail, but the larger pattern of honesty, accountability, and responsibility that now appears in the present moment. Because the purpose of uncovering the truth is not simply to satisfy curiosity about the past. The purpose is to help you regain control of your own perception. When you learn to separate facts from the stories your mind is creating, something powerful happens. The chaos begins to quiet. You begin to see the situation with greater clarity. The emotions are still real, but they are no longer controlling the narrative entirely. And once that clarity begins to return, you are finally able to ask the next important question, not just about what happened before, but about what kind of conversations must happen now. Because understanding the truth of the past is only the beginning. What truly matters is what two people are willing to face together in the present. Once the shock begins to settle and the mind starts separating facts from the stories it creates, there comes a moment that many people both need and fear at the same time. It is the moment when the silence between two partners can no longer hold. The moment when the truth that has surfaced must be spoken about directly. Because discovering years of lies inevitably leads to one unavoidable reality. Difficult conversations must happen, and these conversations are rarely simple. They are emotionally charged, sometimes painful, often slow, but they are also essential. Without them, the relationship remains trapped in a fog of uncertainty where neither person truly understands what is happening next. The first challenge in these conversations is honesty, real honesty, not the careful, partial version that may have existed before. When someone has lived with deception for years, trust is no longer given automatically. Words alone are no longer enough. The betrayed partner needs clarity, consistency, and openness in order to begin understanding what actually happened. This often means asking questions that are uncomfortable for both people. What exactly was hidden? How long did the deception last? What choices were made along the way? For the person who was lied to, these questions are not about punishment. They are about reconstructing reality. When the truth has been fragmented for so long, the mind needs information in order to rebuild a coherent picture of the relationship. But for the partner who lied, answering these questions requires something equally difficult: accountability. Accountability is more than admitting that something happened. It means facing the impact of those choices without minimizing them, without shifting blame, and without hiding behind vague explanations. It requires the willingness to acknowledge the emotional consequences of the deception. And this is often where the real test begins. Because sometimes the person who lied may feel overwhelmed by shame or defensiveness. They may want the conversation to move quickly toward forgiveness or closure. They may feel tempted to say, "That's in the past now," or "Can we just move forward?" But moving forward without understanding what happened is rarely possible. When betrayal has occurred, the injured partner often needs time to ask questions repeatedly, not because they enjoy revisiting the pain, but because each conversation helps restore a sense of clarity and stability. Every honest answer becomes one small step toward rebuilding a shared understanding of reality. Transparency becomes essential during this phase. The partner who lied must demonstrate through actions, not just words, that secrecy is no longer part of the relationship. This might involve sharing information openly, answering questions patiently, and accepting that rebuilding trust is a gradual process rather than an immediate outcome. At the same time, the betrayed partner faces a different challenge. They must decide how much they truly want to know. Sometimes the desire for information can become endless. The mind believes that if every detail is uncovered, the pain will finally make sense. But there is a delicate balance between seeking clarity and becoming trapped in the past. Not every detail leads to healing. What matters more is understanding the larger pattern of behavior and the emotional dynamics that allowed the deception to continue for so long. These conversations also create an opportunity for something deeper to emerge, a clearer picture of the relationship itself. Many couples discover that the lies were not the only problem that existed. Beneath the deception, there may have been long-standing patterns of avoidance, unspoken frustrations, emotional distance, or unmet needs that neither partner fully addressed. Acknowledging these dynamics does not excuse the deception. Responsibility for lying always belongs to the person who chose to lie. But understanding the broader emotional landscape can help both partners see the relationship more honestly than they did before. In some cases, these conversations reveal that both partners are willing to confront difficult truths and work toward rebuilding trust. In other cases, they reveal that the foundation of the relationship has been too deeply damaged to repair. Both outcomes are possible. But what matters most is that the truth becomes visible. Because without honest dialogue, decisions about the future are built on the same fragile ground that allowed deception to exist in the first place. Real conversations, painful as they may be, replace illusion with clarity. And clarity is powerful. It allows two people to stop guessing about each other's intentions. It replaces suspicion with information. It creates a space where real choices can finally be made. Whether the relationship continues or ends, these conversations mark an important turning point. They shift the focus away from hidden realities and toward conscious decisions. Because once the truth is spoken openly, the relationship can no longer survive on silence. It must now survive on honesty. And sometimes the most courageous step after discovering years of lies is not simply confronting the person who deceived you. It is insisting that from this moment forward, the relationship, whatever form it takes, must be built on truth. After the shock has settled, after the mind has worked through the confusion, and after the difficult conversations begin to reveal the truth of what happened, another question slowly starts to emerge. It is a quieter question, but it may be the most important one of all. What kind of future do you want now? When someone discovers years of lies, it is very easy for their entire attention to remain fixed on the past. The mind keeps replaying events, analyzing explanations, searching for a moment where things might have gone differently. But healing does not come from staying permanently inside that past. At some point, the focus must shift forward. This does not mean ignoring the betrayal or pretending that it did not matter. The past must be acknowledged honestly. But once that honesty exists, the most important work becomes deciding how life will continue from this moment. And that decision belongs, first and foremost, to the person who was betrayed. Betrayal often creates a powerful sense of powerlessness. Someone else made choices in secret that affected your life, your relationship, and your emotional safety. For a period of time, it can feel as though control over your own story was taken away. But the truth is that control over the next chapter still belongs to you. Reclaiming that sense of agency is a crucial step in moving forward. It means recognizing that while you cannot change what happened in the past, you still have the authority to define what kind of life you want to live next. For some people, this leads to the decision to rebuild the relationship. If both partners are willing to confront the truth honestly, if there is genuine accountability and effort to change, some couples do manage to create a new kind of partnership after deception. But rebuilding a relationship after years of lies is not about returning to the old version of the marriage. That version has already ended. What exists now is the possibility of building something different, something that relies on transparency, emotional responsibility, and deeper communication than what existed before. This process takes time. Trust does not return overnight. It is rebuilt through consistent actions, through openness, and through a willingness from both partners to face uncomfortable truths. But for rebuilding to work, one condition must be present. The relationship must become a place where honesty is no longer negotiable. For other people, the decision may lead in a different direction. They may realize that the level of trust required to continue the relationship can no longer exist. Or they may recognize that the deception revealed deeper patterns in the relationship that they no longer want to live with. In those cases, choosing to leave is not a failure. It is an act of self-respect. Sometimes the most powerful form of healing comes from stepping away from a relationship that can no longer provide emotional safety. What matters most is that the decision comes from clarity rather than from pressure. Friends, family members, and society often have strong opinions about what someone should do after betrayal. But every relationship has its own history, its own emotional landscape, its own complexity. No one outside that relationship fully understands it, which is why the most important voice in this decision must be your own. What do you need in order to feel respected again? What boundaries are essential for your emotional well-being? What kind of relationship aligns with the person you want to become? These questions shift the focus away from reacting to the betrayal and toward actively shaping the future. They also remind us of something important about relationships. A partnership should not be the place where someone loses their sense of self. It should be the place where two individuals support each other's growth, honesty, and dignity. When deception disrupts that foundation, it forces a moment of reflection that many people would otherwise avoid. It asks difficult questions about values, about boundaries, and about the kind of life we truly want to build. And while that process can feel painful, it can also become a turning point. Because when someone takes the time to reflect deeply on what they need and what they deserve, they often emerge from the experience with a stronger sense of identity and direction. The betrayal may have been something that happened to you, but the future is something you still have the power to create. And that is where the real next step begins. Not in trying to rewrite the past, but in deciding what kind of life you are ready to build from here. Because the most meaningful response to years of lies is not simply finding the right answer about the relationship. It is choosing a future that honors your truth.